Hi, friends. Welcome to today's live stream with Keep Indiana Learning's virtually different digital learning coaches. We know that it is the end of May currently, if you're watching with us live, and we are all, I love this term I saw this weekend, exhausterwomulated. I think that is probably the best description of education in May, but we're going to make it. The finish line is in sight. And we are here today to talk about the Modern Classrooms Project, because that is a really great summer learning opportunity. Maybe if you're thinking about you want something to refresh your practice, you need some PGP points. This is something that we've heard a lot about maybe here in the state of Indiana because there was some scholarships for it this past year. So we decided that we wanted to do a quick live stream and talk about the Modern Classrooms Project. So for those of you who may be thinking, I'm not sure what this is, think of it this way. We all know education is not a one-size-fits-all package. And sometimes they try to shove square pegs into round holes. And so with Modern Classrooms Projects, what it is it is research-backed instructional model that reaches every student. It makes learning accessible to every student. And it's a blend of blended learning. It is self-paced, and it is mastery-based grading. And so when I first heard about it myself, I had a lot of questions about those three things. So we decided to get together, and I have two of my fellow digital learning coaches here with me today. And we're going to just talk to you about our experience with Modern Classrooms and some things that we think are worth sharing and learning. So Adam, I'll pass the mic to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dianna. It's one of those things that, when we're trying to think about how can we, improve our practice, we think about, there's some things that get in the way. How am I going to learn about that? How am I going to get through that? And the Modern Classrooms Project really set up a very clear way to kind of walk through, how to differentiate and how to do these things that are different in the classroom. And so I found it really useful. I'm an English teacher, so I teach secondary English. And I found it as a way, how can I do things differently? How can I, take a part of that kind of blended learning model? How can I look to, get my students more engaged? How can I kind of release some of the workload that I'm doing to be more hands-on with the students? And the Modern Classrooms Project kind of checked a lot of those boxes for me. So that's why I found it kind of interesting and why I liked engaging with the program. So I'm excited to talk more about it for sure.
Yeah. So Adam, I'm kind of the same way. So I use the Modern Classroom project in my engineering classes. We do a lot of work with technology, especially with CAD related things. And it just really lends itself to that blended learning experience. I found myself doing a lot of screencasts of how I wanted them to do certain operations in the CAD software anyway. And so, I just thought, well, this would be a perfect thing to set up where students can kind of do things on their own pace at their own level. However, up until, I went through this program, I kind of was lacking structure. So it was kind of a good way to actually sit down and get some structure and kind of have, with the Modern Classrooms, one of the things that they'll do is partner you up with a mentor. And so, I would have that mentor that, could also guide me and help me think through things and, kind of nudge me in the right direction on kind of just getting those systems in place to get organized and get it to where every kid can learn at their own pace, at their own level.
Mm-hmm. I think that was, my daily job is that I'm a technology instructional coach. And so I tried to go through it with that lens, but then also keeping the lens on as a classroom teacher, because that's who I work with all the time. And I think the things that I got to thinking about were the number one questions I felt like teachers might have is, how does that self-pacing work? Like, do I have my entire semester on there and somebody can just work through all of it? And that was a question that I felt like the Modern Classrooms answered pretty quickly to give you guidance on that pacing. How did you guys set up your pacing structures for your classrooms?
So for me, they broke it down, the task down into what was it? Must do, should do, aspire to do. And so that I kind of let that kind of drive the pace a little bit, in that my higher achievers, they are going to end up doing probably all three of those categories. Your kind of middle of the road sort of students are going to hit probably, well, they'll hit all the must do's. They'll probably get into some of those should do's, maybe not get to the aspire to do's. And, you want all of your learners to do the must do's. So those are the tasks that are going to meet your, kind of the, I don't want to say bare bones, but the minimum task that still meets the state standards of what you're teaching. You need all of your students at least hitting those tasks. But I think, at least for me, one of my biggest problems is I did have those high flyers that would get done in a day. And then, you'd have other students that they would need all week. So now what do I do with these kids for 4 days? And so having that structure of must do, should do, aspire to do, can, leave kids engaged for the full amount of time, even though they may not be working on exactly the same thing, not the same task. But on a related task, and everyone's staying engaged for the full length of time.
Kind of has that enrichment that we talk about needing to have. It makes us think thoughtfully about where we can apply that and how we can incorporate that into the lessons that we teach, I think.
Yeah, and I think for me, it helps me reach all learners a little bit better because, it's kind of easy to teach to the middle, and then you kind of miss that upper quarter and you miss that lower quarter. Whereas if you have these tasks ready and there's procedures in place and there's expectations that, if you get done with X, Y, and Z, then you move on to A, B, and C, then you can take that time and you can work with the students that maybe aren't getting it quite as quick or that need that extra processing time. So it does give you that kind of flexibility to reach a broader spectrum of learners that maybe a traditional classroom you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, and that's I think what I really loved about it is that those students who were the high flyers kind of were able to work through quickly. I was able to kind of check in with them, and they felt they were on the right track, and they were working on those aspire to do tasks. But it really freed me up to work with those students who I know I need to spend more time with. That sometimes in a regular school day, you just lose the time. You think, okay, how am I going to, give this time, to work with these students? You may be with them for a few minutes, but that it really allowed me to work with those kids in a much more, concentrated way. And I think that's really, really helped me, helped kind of free up my time. Working through those like 3 tasks, it's like, okay, I really had to think through. I had to be, I feel like it kind of forces us to be a bit vulnerable in that way, like, making sure we have those kind of 3 buckets filled, and maybe our pacing wasn't quite right, and I kind of had to work through that a little bit with the mentor, just kind of thinking through that pacing a bit. But once I kind of understood, all right, this is how we can set this up, then students really kind of latched onto it, and really, really helped the classroom.
That was my question, because I've not been able to work too closely with somebody really putting it into practice. And I think one of the things that we've heard coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic is a lack of student engagement and really getting the students back in and excited to learn. And I felt like the Modern Classrooms project would really be a tool to help lift student engagement and pass that torch of ownership to their learning. How did that work for you guys?
So I will say that having those tasks listed for the students, and I made it to where the students actually had to come see me, and I had to physically, I made a checklist. I had to check them off for whatever their task was. And to me, that the students really got into that. I got a lot of buy-in into that. I don't know if there was, for the students, it was maybe satisfying to physically having things checked off of the list for them. But I know that because I actually experimented a little bit. I ran this in 2 of my class periods. So one of the class periods, I listed the must do, should do, aspire to do, but I didn't print out a little checklist for them. And then the other ones, I actually printed out a checklist where you're physically checking things off. And I'll say I had much more engagement in the class where they had to bring it to me and I had to look and check off that they have their project or their task or their activity completed. So I will say that really did increase engagement, at least I got a sample size of maybe n equals 40 here, but but at least for my little experiment, it certainly did.
As I say, you got to do kind of your little research with modern classrooms within your own classes. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like I said, it was kind of inadvertent. It was just kind of the way that things went. One class, it made sense to do it that way because it was less techie and more of a physical project they were building. So I could, just kind of look at their design and make sure it fit the criteria, and then check them off, and they could move on to the next thing. But I will say I'll keep that method even for my more software oriented tasks, just because I feel like the kids, they really responded to that quite a bit more. So.
As techie as I am, there is something very satisfying about having that physical list and checking things off. It's a feeling of accomplishment. So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, or you can have a spreadsheet that auto formats, and so whenever you put little Y's, like Y for is this task completed, and it highlights it green, takes it from red to green. That's another one that kids like doing. They like seeing that thing turn green from red.
I definitely think that was a good analogy. They kind of stressed, like, a lot of the trackers that I saw examples of, they use that stoplight model that we're so used to seeing, green, yellow, and red. So I thought that was good. I know from a coaching perspective, I've tried to implement some of the strategies. I loved making an instructional video is something that we've all had to do coming out of the pandemic, but the thoughts that they had you put into like a good quality instructional video time frame. Our students' attention span is just very different than it used to be, and things that would keep the students more engaged in that video, because that's a complaint I hear a lot from a teacher. I thought those were really valuable tips that they gave us, because in that blended learning model, sometimes you want that, whether you're going to do a flipped or a modified flipped classroom, or they're at home learning virtually, you're going to need an instructional video. And so those tips I thought were really valuable.
Yeah, and they layered those. Sorry, Bo.
No, you go ahead.
They layered those tips in, throughout the entire program, which it was really nice to see. I think that's one thing I really enjoy when I'm like in some type of PD or training, is that like they are reflecting the practices they're asking us to do. And so, all of their instructional video, and if they weren't, they were upfront about it. Like, hey, this video, it doesn't meet the criteria, but there's a reason why. So I really liked that the program kind of really outlined these things and had clear expectations for what they were hoping the teacher to create, and then they also were reflecting that practice so we could see it, having us do like the must do, should do, aspire to do. It's like, okay, like I know that this is what I need to do, but if I have the time, I can get to these aspire to do. So that structure helped me immensely doing the project, for sure.
I love anytime there's that modeling. I'm a learn by doing. So when I can see it in action as I'm trying to recreate, I'm more successful that way. So
yeah, we're educators, but people are people. So I feel like the way we respond to that sort of structure is going to be very similar to the way our students respond. So, I think we can see, I know that whenever I was going through it, I wanted to do, I felt like I was kind of like slacking off if I just did the must do stuff. Right. So I always did at least the should do. And then, the aspire to do, if I had some time, I would do it. Or, that was a case by case basis, but, and you kind of reflect on that, and that's how the students are going to feel as well. At least the majority of them, everyone's a little different.
Did you find that, you had to help students kind of with that idea of taking ownership of their learning? Most often they're told, this is what you're going to do, this is when it needs to be done by. When they had this control, did some of them have a period of adjustment before they felt successful there? Because I'm sure for some of them, this was kind of a new concept.
So for me, yes and no. I definitely had to talk some students through, there was the constant question, well, am I done? Am I done? I did the must do's. Is that it? Am I done? I got this homework. Can I work on this homework instead? And so we had to have a discussion about, what's the difference between just meeting the minimum possible requirements and actually going above and beyond and doing something that you're proud of. Especially, for me as an engineer, I'm an engineering teacher. I implemented these in engineering classes. So most of the time we were kind of building things. They were parts of a larger design, a task. And so it's like, yeah, you could meet the minimum requirements, but your project would be a lot cooler if you did some of these other things. And so I kind of avoided that. Am I done? I never said yes or no. It was just kind of, okay, well, now we need to have a conversation about, where you want to be as an engineer. How well prepared are you going to be for that next class if you only do the minimums?
Yeah. I think it sounds like you maybe, not that I didn't handle it well, but handled it maybe a little bit better. There's just that flip of, understanding of how they are used to kind of walking through, we're a 7-period day school. So it's like, they're just kind of used to going through the motions really. And so when they walked in one day and I was like kind of disrupting that, it felt new, it felt scary to them. And so, a lot of them wanted to do that kind of must do. And we were kind of working through like thesis statements and kind of part of that English essay writing. So they want to write it, submit it, and move on. And then when we talk about like the revision process as part of that kind of should do thing, a lot of them just want to move on. So that took some time, and I hope to kind of revamp what I wrote. And I think writing that one lesson through the program, was nice too, to kind of implement it right then. But yeah, still working on that piece for sure.
Definitely, I think it's a reflective process. You're going to find things along the way that works, things that you want to tweak, and things that you go, I really need to rethink that one. And we've talked about some of the positives. I kind of thought about some of the things that people might go, okay, that sounds great, but so common concerns that I heard when I was talking to people. Time, investment of time. The Indiana had the scholarships last year, so it was the full-on mentorship partnership where you had, and in the summer when I did it, it was a 5-week program, where during the school year it was a 12-week program, I believe. So I kind of had the summer intensive. When did you guys do yours?
I just got done with mine just a few weeks ago. So mine happened, it was over the span of a few weeks. It was the more condensed version. But I still never was real stressed. Honestly, I took a few hours each Sunday and pretty much got it knocked out. I did not really feel like it was a big time commitment for me. Like I said, it probably a couple hours per submission for me is about the time commitment I was putting in.
Yeah, I worked on mine through the fall session, so kind of like right before winter break. So I think the longer session, I think the 12-week session or whatever. So that gave a longer time to kind of work on things. So that kind of helped to have a clear picture of when things were due. And I don't know, I'm assuming it was the same way for the shorter versions, but day one when it started, I had a kind of a roadmap of these are the suggested days that we would think you should have these done by. And that was nice to have those kind of timeline set out. And then I actually missed a deadline, and they kind of reshuffled my. I asked for kind of an extended period on that, and they're like, actually, okay, that's fine. Just these are now your new dates. So that was nice to have that flexibility to, as we're kind of working through that busy season in the late fall.
And I got 30 PGPs for doing it. So I felt they valued your time and rewarded it commensurately. I think one of the things is, I will be honest, as a classroom teacher, I sometimes didn't know what I was doing. If my prep period was 4th period, I might still be finishing 6th and 7th hours lessons. So the upfront thing is that if I want to organize by chapters or units or a module, you have to have all that front loaded before it opens to accommodate that student pacing. It might be a 2-week unit and my students are all going to test on day 14. But I have to have all of the module ready to go when I open it up on day 1. And so that was a kind of a flip of thinking about how you could do it. And I think when we were talking, somebody mentioned this. This is where I think the buddy system would be amazing. Like in your department, or if you're an elementary teacher, if you have a grade level partner, I think you could find a lot of value from a couple of you attempting to kind of tackle this together.
Yeah, that's definitely being able to share the workload would be a blessing, because you're absolutely right. You're creating all your resources right up front, or even if you're not actually creating, you're gathering them all. And so you're definitely front loading your work. I mean, there's goods and bad to that too, though. Once it's done, it's done. And you've got it, and you don't have to worry about it for, until you need to make revisions. So, which to me, I like doing things that way. So that doesn't necessarily bother me, but yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Diana. Like if I got classes after lunch, then I'm planning that during lunch. So,
the road to Hades is paved with good intentions, and mine is gold lined.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all have those days, those classes that are like that sometimes. Working through, but yeah, I agree. It was one of those things you had to think through every little piece. It was definitely one of those kind of backward design things. You had to think about the end and kind of work through all of that, make sure you had all of the pieces and parts and all the videos. Making sure you had all of that for those kids who were those high flyers who were getting through it quicker than others. So
yeah. So the other thing we've talked about is through Indiana, there was a series of scholarships where you could get it's a $500 training if you do the full-on mentorship, the paid version. And Indiana had a series of scholarships. Those are all taken now, but there is a wait list for this last summer session if somebody's interested in that. And we're going to share some resources. I know I'm going to have some web links that you can go to. And then if you come back and look at this on YouTube later, there's going to be resources in the information. And so you can sign up for these scholarships. There's the free version of the course, which again, I think, man, if you could find a buddy, we were talking at like kind of pre-planning. I have a learning partner that she's my accountability partner. We set a goal. And because I know she's counting on me, I tend to meet it. And we allow ourselves flexibility, but I know I'm just way more successful in that. And then, depending on what your district's goals are. If your district is really looking into something like this, reach out to Modern Classrooms Project because they love to work with districts and get something set up there that they may be able to come up with some kind of a custom plan for you in your district. I know we've talked a lot about here in the state of Indiana, we hear a lot about UDL anymore. And I think definitely looking at this Modern Classrooms Project, that's a really great way to incorporate UDL components into your practice. Shameless plug, next year as a digital learning coach, I'm going to be doing a book study with one of the other digital learning coaches on UDL blended learning. So we're going to kind of do a book study through the coaches and maybe have some book highlights because this has a lot of practical application pieces that you can, if you're just dipping your toes into the UDL water. And frankly, even if you just want to go back and revisit some things and think about refreshing your practice too. So.
Yeah, you mentioned the buddy system. It made me think about like one of our concerns we kind of talked about was like student buy-in. But if you are partnering with like another person in your grade level or in your department, like how quickly will students be able to like buy in? Because, multiple teachers are doing this. Sometimes when you're trying to roll out a new initiative, if you're the only one doing it, it feels like you're just kind of up against a brick wall. But if you have someone there who's also implementing that with you, how powerful I think that could be to have those students. Oh, well, I had that in so-and-so's class and in Mr. Hofer's class, like kind of reinstitutes that idea for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, Adam, talking about having someone else kind of reinforce that. Actually, that happened at our school. We had another teacher that was going through the program the same time as me, and I heard some students overheard them talking. Mrs. So-and-so, she's doing videos in her class now, and she's not doing like lecture anymore. And they were kind of complaining about it, and I was like, guys, we do that in here every single day. It's like that's just the way. I mean, she's just doing the same thing we do in here, and you guys have never said anything, have anything bad to say about this class. So it's like sometimes students they don't really realize what's going on behind the scenes, but It's like sometimes they need you to point that out. But yeah, exactly. If you had, if the whole math department was going about their business in the same way, it's not like, oh, Mr. So-and-so is kind of doing something off the wall. That's just the way things are done,
Yeah. Yep. The buddy system is valuable in many, many ways.
Yeah, for
sure. So, anything else we want to think of to share that you can think of that we had thought about?
I will say, if you are a standards-based school, this sort of teaching style is going to definitely be right up your alley. That mastery learning fits right into a standards-based model very, very well.
It does.
We are not standards-based where I'm at, but so I had to kind of make some creative decisions with how we implemented grades. But it can be done. I think it's a good way. I think mastery learning is obviously a great way to do things. You just kind of have to make it work if you're not in a standards-based model and make it fit into your grade book.
It's a great point. Also, this bit.ly you can see on the screen right now, that is a link to the Facebook group about Modern Classrooms Project. Tons and tons of resources shared there. And it's not like some social media where you'll see a lot of negativity and complaining. It's a very affirming space where sharing successes, sharing resources, collaboratively thinking. Love some of the ideas that I get from there. So that's the other piece to this. When you go into this, you might be the only one in your district or the only one in your hallway. But there are a lot of places that you can find support. That Facebook group is one. You can follow Modern Classrooms on Twitter. If you are a podcast listener, they have a podcast. That has gotten to be my baking routine, is when I'm baking it in the kitchen, I throw a podcast on because I can listen and get my work done. So little things like that, I think, are really valuable to offer systems of support to you.
Yeah. And that same point, within the program itself, you can go to the Facebook group and get support. But I thought it was really helpful, and I kind of forgot about this until you mentioned the group, was like all of the videos that were there from like teachers of all the different disciplines. Like I found that super helpful to be able to like click on, oh, this other English teacher for secondary who went through this program. Here's a short video explaining like that just sparked that in my mind. Like, oh, I forgot about that piece of the program. So
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Adam, how many times have you been to a PD and you're like, yeah, that's all nice, but how's that going to work in my classroom? How's that working in an English classroom or a math classroom? They do a great job of showing you through examples of exactly how certain disciplines are implementing that in their own classrooms.
Yeah. And I know I'm going to speak for all three of us. These are our Twitter handles here that you can see on the screen. We would be happy to answer any question you may have. If you're curious about it, want to know some of the challenges, we are more than willing to talk and share with you.
Absolutely.
For sure.
All right. So I think that is a little bit about Modern Classrooms Project and the ways that we have found that we can implement it into our practice. And we are so grateful that you spent some time with us learning and talking and sharing. And we would love to hear how Modern Classrooms Project may have worked for you in your class, or share your successes with us.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt. Hi, I'm Marty Hoofer, Digital Content Manager. We have a question in the chat. And so I wanted to ask the question for the viewer. I think this is interesting, but I'm curious where the student collaboration and discourse come into play. Is it completely individualized? And that was too good of a question to not have you answer here.
That is a fantastic question, Melissa. Sorry that we didn't miss that in the chat. So one of the components of it is this is where you can do like station rotation type components. And this would be a great place where you could have the students collaborate. You can get students that are at the same pace in the module or the plan or the unit, and they can work together and have those collaborative pieces and getting them talking. And then you can also have whole group discussion at certain points. Have that whole group discussion to start with, bring everybody together at a point, and have another whole group before they kind of go back onto that self-pacing. So you kind of have to think about the material and the content that you're doing in that moment, but there's definitely ways to get that collaborative discourse going.
Adam or Bo, do you want to add anything to that?
I know, like for me, we'll start a unit, start a new activity, new unit, whatever, usually with just some direct instruction, whole group instruction. And then once all the students get done with their must-do tasks, we will kind of go into small groups and we'll do some peer evaluations, and let them talk in small groups, kind of a trade and grade, but more kind of a fancy trade and grade, I guess. So they use the terms grows and glows. And so I adopted that terminology whenever I was implementing this. And so the students kind of grade each other, but really what they're doing is they're leaving 2 glows and 2 grows. And they're just kind of, trading around until they've seen 3 or 4 other examples of student work and have a chance to give feedback. So we still do that small group. We still do some, peer evaluation. We still do direct instruction. So in a lot of ways, it still feels like a traditional class. It's those in between times that we kind of shake things up and maybe do things a little more untraditionally.
Yeah, when students would watch a video or whenever that was assigned, that became a good kind of jumping point. So I didn't have to spend the time going through that lecture. They've already should have engaged with that. So it allowed us to kind of come in and kind of have that conversation, a discourse like we would normally, and that kind of allowed us to get going on the lesson. Students already knew that ahead of time. And then kind of similar to you, having those small groups, kind of working with each other, kind of collaborating in those, and I try not to put all of the kids who are in the high flyer groups together. I try to keep them mixed up so they are still helping out. So the kids who maybe are finished with the lesson they're helping those students who are still maybe on those must-do tasks. So
awesome. It was a great question, and I wanted to make sure to get that input, because I think sometimes when we think about a flipped classroom, we think that these pieces go away, and they don't. They just get rolled in differently, and you might almost argue more impactfully.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, there's this myth that I hear a lot of times that our kids are on their devices all day long. And just because you're doing this Modern Classrooms project, it's not all technology driven. There are unplugged pieces, and that's where that station rotation piece can come in, where they're doing hands-on and practical applications in that blended environment, that we really strive to meet.
Yeah, Diana, one of my lessons that I did through Modern Classroom, my students were building a robot. So, it was, you do X, Y, and Z, and then you can go back to your video and watch what you're supposed to do next. And if you get halfway through your build process and you realize you don't know what you're doing, you don't have to flag me down to go show you. You just you can go back and there's a video to watch. So I can be in multiple places at once because I've recorded myself. And the students can kind of have that, at demand or on demand, I should say, help.
That, and I know Adam mentioned that. Now you've mentioned that, and I would like to 3 times emphasize: you feel like you multiply yourself. And here's another piece: students that may be absent on a day still get the same authentic instruction that the students in class got because of that instructional video. And then to have that ability where they can go back and rewatch it. And if you're blessed with one of those platforms like Edpuzzle or even like in our Canvas studio, you can see who's watched. You can see how much time they've spent with it. And that helps you as the teacher really start to identify, all right, they've got the video, but they need some systems of support. So that's where you can pull them in. And because you can be in more than one place, you can work with those really small groups.
Yeah. So really, you've created the gift of time, because you are multiple places at once. And what is the biggest complaint teachers have? There's not enough time.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a way to create it.
In my former life, pre-tech coach, I was a Spanish teacher, and I think about the things that I was doing then that I wasn't even sure were the right things to do. I was just doing what I thought was best. And I did that. I would make these instructional videos with my grammar lessons. And then because speaking and communication was such a core component for my classes, if you tried to stand up and have a conversation with a group of 24 or 28 or 30 students, they're very hesitant to participate, number one. Number two, you can't get to everybody. And so by having that ability, when I first got a device given to me, the time that I was able to get by embracing instructional videos and pieces like that, then I could pull small groups back to talk with, to work with students who'd been absent, to identify my struggling language speakers and really give them that lift that they needed.
Yeah. All right. Well, so sorry to interrupt the end of your show. You had wrapped it up so nicely, but I can't let this go.
That's
so
great.
Thank you for letting me jump in.
We're happy to have you.
All right. Well, thank you. As always, coaches, you provide such great content. And like they said, viewers, feel free to reach out. And there's my Twitter handle as well. Feel free to reach out to any of us. I don't know much about Modern Classroom Project, but I can point you to them. And we appreciate you being a part of, coaches, we appreciate you being a part of Keep Indiana Learning. And viewers, we appreciate you as well. So thank you, guys.